Graves is outside St James's Park for us. Vinny O'Connor's at Anfield. Pete, good to see you. Firstly to you, look, what has Isak had to say about Newcastle today on his way out?
Thanks, Will. He's basically said thank you, hasn't he, to Newcastle United's supporters and the club. I think there was a period where I think the fans thought he wasn't going to say anything. He'd sort of moved to Liverpool and obviously hasn't played all summer, hadn't played any of the games so far this season. And the signing was announced and there was no mention of Newcastle, no mention of the supporters, no mention of the history. So I think there was a period where the fans were thinking maybe he's not going to say anything at all. But in fairness, in the last half an hour or so, he has come out and he's offered a thank you. There's a video of him scoring goals and he's stopped short of apologising, I think, which some Newcastle fans would have been wanting. But he has given a thank you to Newcastle United supporters and to the football club and mentioned that it's been an honour to get the club back into the Champions League and help them win their first domestic trophy in 70 years. So he has spoken, and that will be appreciated by some, even though as I'm standing here today, of course, it is the day after deadline day. He has only just moved to Liverpool and it's still quite raw here. There's still a lot of, I suppose, disappointment and anger that a player who was so important for Newcastle United has decided to move away. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, in sort of down the line, like I say, it's still very raw, but down the line, Newcastle fans will hopefully be able to look back with some fondness at the period that Isak played for the club. He, of course, scored the goal in the final that helped them secure that first domestic trophy in 70 years, the Carabao Cup. And I think it's just the nature of some footballers and some people in life. That's just the way it is. If you play for the team that finished second in the league and the team that finished first in the league wants to sign you, some players and some people would like to go that one step higher. That's just the nature. But there are other characters in the game who would stay at the football club regardless, that wear the badge with pride and would not leave despite what temptations may be coming elsewhere. Alexander Isak plays for a team that finished fifth in the league and won the Carabao Cup. He's decided he wanted to move to a team that won the league and will be challenging for the league once again and challenging to win the Champions League. Yes, Newcastle fans are disappointed. Yes, it's still very raw, but down the line, might they look back with some pride and happiness at the period over the last few years? Bearing in mind as well the money that's come in from that sale, they've been able to completely rejuvenate this Newcastle United squad. They brought in a goalkeeper, a defender, a midfielder, a winger and two centre forwards effectively this window as a result of that sale. So I think in time Newcastle fans will probably reflect quite happily on this window in general, and they'll just be hoping to have a big season and no doubt hoping they can get one over Liverpool when they go to Anfield later in the season.
Yeah, Pete, I wonder what the Newcastle players have made of this whole ordeal. It is an ordeal, it's a saga, whatever word you want to use. It's stretched on, hasn't it, for the whole summer, and how their relationship potentially might have changed with Alexander Isak. But Anthony Gordon's had something to say, hasn't he, today?
Yeah, I mean, look, some players have come out and spoken of the friendship. I think Anthony Gordon put something on his social media talking about the friendship and their chemistry on the field. And there's no doubt about it. Gordon and Isak had a great on-field chemistry. You look at Jacob Murphy and Isak as well, particularly last season, how well they played together. I think Sven Botman as well was someone who came out publicly and thanked Alexander and wished him well. That's two players. I haven't seen too many more. I mean, that might be quite telling. I haven't seen, sometimes in these situations, you see the entire squad liking posts and good luck, mate, and all that in the comments. I haven't seen too many players come out. And I think that, Eddie Howe is so all about creating this family environment. His players he wants them to all be best friends and to all feel like a family and to have each other's backs and so on. And I just wonder how many of the players, and I've spoken to some, are disappointed by the way that this summer has played out. Isak, of course, firstly refusing to play in pre-season friendlies, then refusing to go on the summer tour of the Far East, then refusing to pull on his boots and play in the opening Premier League games and that League Cup match as well. So, he's missed a host of matches, and I think there will be players who are disappointed in the way he's gone on this summer. But, football, short memories. I think once the international break's over and Newcastle United get back on the field with the new players in the squad, then all memories of Alexander Isak will soon be gone.
Yeah, and finally, Pete, I just wonder also, how Newcastle feel officially, because if the statement's anything to go by, it was hardly song and verse, was it? But Eddie Howe, as you mentioned, is glad to put it all behind him.
I heard that the typewriter just ran out of ink, unfortunately, so they just had to put it out. No, yeah, it was a very short statement, wasn't it? Just 30 odd words. Mentioned how many games he'd played, but no mention of the sort of goals or anything else. I think it is a bit of a sad end to something. I just think that the Newcastle United ownership and coaching staff and some of the players, as I mentioned, will be disappointed with the way that this summer has played out. But you know what? It's over now. And as a football club, Newcastle United can start moving forward without Alexander Isak in their squad. They know who's here. They've got a full squad of players who want to be here, including those 6 new additions this summer. So, yeah, not a nice end to what was a wonderful sort of marriage in some ways between Alexander Isak and Newcastle United. Let's not forget, he was a fairly unknown player. Real Sociedad, hadn't scored a huge number of goals. Eddie Howe saw something in him that he believed could turn him into a top Premier League player. He brought him to the Premier League, he gave him the platform, he coached him, he improved him, and he's become, without doubt, if not the best striker in the Premier League, then one of the best strikers in the Premier League. But he's now a Liverpool player, Premier League transfer record, as you said. And and I think Liverpool have signed a wonderful player, and Newcastle United will move on with their new look squad, and will look to try and move on from Alexander Isak just as quickly as possible.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, the typewriters from the Liverpool fans have not run out of ink, have they, Vinny O'Connor at Anfield, because they're saying plenty of things about Alexander Isak, and I just wonder how much that guy can take Liverpool to the next level, Vinny.
I think so. I think that's the feeling here at Liverpool, because, of course, he adds greater potency to their attack. When you look at his goal-scoring record, I was going through the stats from last season, of course, and I know Arneslot talked about Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz kind of matching the kind of numbers that Mo Salah was providing himself. But at the same time, the combined goal total in the Premier League between Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz was 23, the same amount as Alexander Isak scored in the Premier League last season. Darwin Núñez himself, who Alexander Isak is taking that number 9 shirt. Darwin Núñez scored just 5 Premier League goals last season as well. They really have got that focal point now for their attack. It takes a little bit of pressure, I suppose, off Hugo Ekitike. I think someone like Florian Wirtz will benefit as well, not just from the fact that he can lay on chances for someone like Alexander Isak, and there's a good chance that he'll finish them. I mean, you look at his percentage goal scoring rate in the Premier League, his goals per game ratio, and it's something like, it's close to Mo Salah's. It's around the 62-63% mark, just like Mo Salah's as well. So, as well as that, Alexander Isak attracts players, creates space for midfielders like Florian Wirtz as well, and he brings players into play. And again, the wide players, Mo Salah will benefit, Cody Gakpo benefit from having that kind of focal point through the middle, that kind of Premier League know-how that Alexander Isak brings. So in terms of that Liverpool attack, yeah, of course, there's going to be a great deal of excitement, I think, amongst the playing staff, amongst the management, but undoubtedly the fans. You've seen the reaction from the fans on social media as well. Yes, it's been a long-running saga to get to this point, but the fact that Alexander Isak is a Liverpool player has been met with a good deal of approval around these parts.
All fans having missed out on Mark Gahey so late on in the window.
I think it would have been a bigger problem for Liverpool if they hadn't got Alexander Isak in. And I say that, of course, Liverpool would be better had they been able to bring Mark Gahey in as well. But at the same time, I mentioned Hugo Ekitike benefiting from someone like Alexander Isak being there and taking the kind of focus off him and really providing that spearhead in attack for Liverpool. I think Liverpool have the the players that means they can cope without Mark Gay at the back. Obviously, they've got that tried and tested partnership between Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate. Joe Gomez, we saw coming on as a substitute for Konate against Arsenal, and how important his contribution was in the latter stages of that game. Not more so than getting in front of Gyökeres at the near post and being able to clear behind for a corner kick as well. Leone has, of course, come in. We're expecting big things from him, albeit maybe not so much this season. You expect him to be maybe drip-fed into that first-team picture as well. But, yeah, obviously Liverpool would have been a lot stronger had Mark Gay come in. At the same time, it's not necessarily dead. It's not necessarily set in stone that he won't become a Liverpool player. It's something they can revisit if they need to in January and perhaps come up with a deal with Crystal Palace. Or, of course, they can wait until the end of the season. We know that, obviously, Mark Gay can speak to foreign clubs when it comes to January, whereas he'll just have 6 months left on his contract. And maybe Liverpool could take a little bit of a risk in that terms, given that we know he wanted to come here, and wait until the end of the season to get him on a free. So that's looking at the long game, but for now I think Liverpool will feel that they have the players that can cope without the signing of Mark Gay.
Vinny, thank you very much. So both Wissa and Isak get their moves after a protracted period where they haven't been playing football. Our chief correspondent, Carvey Solikor, and football correspondent Rob Dorset join me now. Rob, what does this suggest, given what's happened over the last 12 hours or so, and, for large parts of the window? Do players have too much power? And what can we take away from this?
It's certain that players have a lot of power if they're as good as Mark Gay and Alexander Isak and Yoane Wissa. And look, I've been speaking to a lot of people involved in football and involved around the recruitment part of football, and Carvey does as well. And they're saying that it's definitely changed in recent years. If you are as good as these players are, then you have an awful lot of power. And I think what's really significant and interesting for me in this window is we've seen more, particularly strikers, top strikers, move to the Premier League than we've ever seen before. And that speaks volumes about the purchasing power of the Premier League and the pull of the Premier League and why they want to come here. But with Isak and Wissa, they both agitated in the extreme, didn't they, if we can describe it like that, to make sure they got their moves. Both of them put very strong, shocking statements on social media, let's be honest, where they criticised their own employers, said that promises had been broken, and they got their move as a result of that. Now, would they have got their move without that sort of agitation? Interesting to see. I don't think Alexander Isak would have got his move away from Newcastle. They were desperate to keep hold of him. And Brentford were very keen to keep hold of Wissa as well. And you compare that with Mark Gay, who's loves Crystal Palace and has been the ultimate professional in the way that he's played, scored that wonder goal in what we thought might be his final game for Crystal Palace. And yet he hasn't got his move and he hasn't agitated for a move. Is there a connection there? On the face of it, it would seem so. And the people I speak to in the industry say there is now, if you are an elite player, an inordinate amount of power that those players hold and their representatives. And if they exercise that power, they often get their wish. And the bottom line is clubs don't want to keep players that are unhappy. It's very difficult for a manager and for a club to keep a player that has been as explicit as Wissa and Isak were in saying they wanted to leave. I think it was a very difficult situation for Brentford, an even more difficult situation for Newcastle. And it felt an inevitability that those players would leave in the end. I felt the same about Gay, and he didn't move. I don't know. Maybe there's something in that.
Carvey, has the behaviour, particularly of Yoane Wissa and Alexander Isak in this window, set a dangerous precedent? Is this a trend we are going to see more of going forward?
I think we've seen a lot of it in the past as well. I mean, going back many, many years, we had players like Pierre van Hooijdonk at Nottingham Forest, for instance. So this is not something new. I think something that is perhaps new, though, is, and without, I'm not referring specifically to the Isak or the Wissa case, what we've seen more and more of recently is sort of intermediaries getting involved and players making their minds up well in advance about which clubs they want to go to. Whereas in the old days, what used to happen is that a club would pick up the phone and call another club and make an offer, and only when a deal had been agreed would permission be given for the player to speak to his prospective new club. Whereas that seems to have changed. I don't know if it's got something to do with the amount of intermediaries in the game or because of social media. Because if you look at social media, so many players appear to have agreed personal terms. Well, how can you agree personal terms when a deal hasn't been done between the clubs? I mean, in the old days, we used to call it tapping up. Yeah. And if it happened, it would be reported to the governing bodies and clubs would be charged. Whereas now it just seems to be just accepted that these players, and again, I'm not saying that's the case with Isak or it's the case with Wissa, but things seem to have been set up well in advance with a lot of these deals that we've seen go through.
And I think, in fairness, you look at the Morgan Gibbs-White situation at Forest and his failed move to Tottenham. Remember, Forest accused Tottenham of tapping him up, made a formal complaint to the Premier League about it. And you and I both must have thought, God, that's quite old school. You know, that we don't hear that anymore because it's
you don't hear the term tapping up.
You don't. Anymore. No, it's exactly absolutely right, and it's become a part of the norm. Carver's absolutely right that clubs who want to buy a player will sound them out. Are they interested? If you are interested, what might it cost us in terms of wages? How long would you be looking for in a contract? That's normal now, and Carvey's quite right. That never used to be the case. And with Morgan Gibbs-White staying at Forest and signing a new contract after they'd accused Spurs of tapping him up and making an offer that they felt was bang on what his release clause was, that felt like a throwback. And I was a little bit amazed that fell through, if you like. And there's an example of player power not working because Gibbs-White wanted his move, didn't get it. He's very happy to stay at Forest and sign a new contract, by the way, but it doesn't always work.
There's been so much talk of gentlemen's agreements, broken promises. How much do you think there'll be a tightening up from clubs, from agents, from all parties in the way that these contracts are actually structured to avoid the he said, she said, I could go, he said, she didn't?
I think, football, the contracts are really long and complicated. There's a lot in them. I don't think you can change them in any way to deal with this whole issue of players thinking they've been made promises and the club hasn't kept the promise. I think all that happens is they have conversations with a director of football or with a head coach, and maybe they're told, look, if a suitable bid comes in for you, then we would consider it. And maybe, one person has a different recollection of what was said in that conversation to the other person, or the director of football moves on and he's replaced by somebody else. I think that's a real grey area. But the bottom line is, a promise is not worth anything in football unless it's written down in a legally binding contract.
And I spoke to a specialist legal sports lawyer on exactly that subject over the matter of Alexander Isak, who said that promises had been broken. And this lawyer said to me, he hasn't got a case. It's as simple as that. If it's not written down, the Premier League rules on contracted players are very clear. If it is not in their official form and written down, it doesn't have any legal grounding, unless he goes and makes perhaps a separate claim legally away from football. So Carvey's absolutely right. There's an awful lot of these discussions that happen. Christian Purslow, who we had live on the programme yesterday during deadline day, was at Aston Villa, and he was talking to me about how he'd made promises to players in the past that when he was trying to sell a football club, if they didn't get the club sold, he'd let them leave. And people were good for their word back then, is the way he described it to me. I'm not sure it works like that right now.
Given how much money Liverpool have spent in this window, guys, and look, there we go, £446.5 million. I mean, 42 is like your old 1.5, isn't it, these days? But, I mean, well, two separate questions. The extra pressure, Carvey, on Arne Slot now to deliver with that squad that he has. And I know they've recouped a lot of money as well. But if they don't win the Premier League, Carvey, or they don't win the Champions League, is that a failure?
I think, yes, it would be. I think the important thing to stress there is the net spend. Liverpool's net spend is around 200 million. They didn't spend very much, if anything at all, last summer. So it's only 100 million every year. So I think we should keep that in mind as well. I know a big thing is going to be made out of the fact that it looks like they've spent more than £400 million. But the important thing is the net spend. Will it be a failure if they don't win the title or the Champions League? I think it would be. But even before they did this spending this summer, I made them the favourites to win the Premier League. I think the Champions League, obviously, it's tougher to win, But I think they've got a very good chance of winning that now with this squad that they've assembled.
Well, that's the key point that Carve made, isn't it? You know, it's all well and good pumping out 446.5, but actually outgoings, and the latest of those being Harvey Elliott with an obligation to buy, it's pretty good business, isn't it?
Well, look, yeah, we've seen it with Chelsea and Manchester City have really active production lines of young talent coming through. And the amount of resource that they pump into those young players and their academies is bearing fruit, because if they don't feature for the first team very much, they sell them on, and that enables them to spend on top-level players, and it's what the elite clubs do these days. For Liverpool, I was staggered by the amount they spent, and incredibly impressed with the window that they had. It felt to me, Liverpool, the reigning Premier League champions, were there to be shot at, and it needed the other clubs to buy in to match their squads. They had a lot of changes in attacking departments, and that's what anybody connected with Liverpool will tell you. They lost 3 forward players that they needed to replace, and that was largely where they spent their money. But they're definitely stronger than they were last season, and it's a matter for everybody else to try and catch them.